Okay, welcome to the final session of the conference, and this is the BMC broadcast management discussion. The whole thing about this is to review basically where are your broadcast messages being sent, why would you need to send them, where you can send them and create them, who can send them and create them, and so forth. And then we go into a consideration of doing it in SRM, which you may be able to do in DWP. I haven't built it that way. And we'll get into showing you where it's an option that's available that I like, and I'm trying to convince my current customer to use. So broadcast messages are really sending out something to a group or an individual, or to a group or to a location or to a company to let them know that something's going to happen. In most cases, based on where you can get access to, will depend on what permissions you need to have to be able to broadcast something out to the masses. The first one is basically the mid-tier. So the mid-tier, you'd have to have the functional role of broadcast submitter, so you can go ahead and create a broadcast through any of the primary forms and consoles. The SmartID, again, you'd have to have the functional role of broadcast submitter, but you have the create new broadcast option that pops up so you can create the broadcast. In digital workplace, you have to have DWP admin rights so you can get into the DWP admin console to create the broadcast. But you don't have to have the functional role of broadcast submitter. So it all comes down to where are you going to create these and what happens when you do create them. So if I came in the DWP, well, the first one you look at is I'm in ITSM. If I go into ITSM and create a broadcast, will it show up in DWP? Will it show up in SmartID and show up in ITSM? And the answer is yes. It'll show up in all those places. If I go to the DWP admin console and create the broadcast message, will it show up in ITSM? The answer is no. Will it show up in SmartID? The answer is no. So then why would you go to DWP and create a broadcast if you're not going to let your support agents know about it? Because they're not going to go into DWP for the most part. And then on SmartID, if you go into there to create a broadcast, you're going to see it in SmartID, you're going to see it in ITSM, but you're not going to see it in DWP. So where's the benefits of having broadcast capability and how you can utilize that functionality? So the first thing I want to show you is how to create one in DWP. Again, you need to have the DWP admin rights to get to the console. You click on the broadcast, which you get in there, and then you click on to view the existing broadcast. You can click on it and it brings it up. You can't modify. Once you save it, you cannot modify it. So if the broadcast needs to be changed because the text is wrong, you need to delete it and recreate the entry itself. If you're ready to send it, you just click on the send. And this is one of the headaches I have if I was not an administrator, would be to figure out what is the 00001 value or 2 or 3. I don't know what these groups are. These are group ID numbers that are created. I have no clue on it, but I can broadcast it to incident users, masters. But again, this is DWP. Why would I do it there when they don't come into DWP? So you're limited in this case to who you can send it out by group. So you have to be aware of knowing what the company group ID number is that you want to send it to, which is kind of like knowing the one on each end with 8 zeros in the middle is Cabro Services. That's understandable, but not if you have new companies that. So in order to find out what those are, you're going to have to give access to the person that's creating these broadcasts to the group form so they can do a group ID search to find out what they're looking for. Or they can do a search for the company that they're looking for. Or they can look for the group that they want to send it to a group. But again, the problem is you don't want to send it to a group because that group is in SmartID. It's not in DWP. You do have some limitations in sending the report itself. By default, the expiration date appears after 24 hours. I mean, it has a default 24-hour time period. You can change it in that capacity. We already talked about the broadcast too. Your message is limited to 255 characters. Once you submit it, it pops up in the notification icon of DWP where they can see it, of the broadcast. Once it becomes active, in that capacity. Once it's active, that's when they see it. Now, if they remove it, it never shows back up on their screen. So if they said, hey, it's going to occur, be aware of it. Well, actually, it'll actually start before that. Let me rephrase that. When you save it, it automatically shows up on the notification. And if it's scheduled for next week and they say, okay, I read it X, then something happens next week and they really didn't forget or remember the broadcast, then they're all lost and they're going to start creating tickets and so forth. And they should have been aware of it. So it has some issues in that capacity. And again, as I said, they would see it in DWP through the notification bells. So in the information, you do have limitations. You have 1,000 characters to include space and punctuation in the text. You can include a website link that they can click on if you want to reference where that information is and so forth. We talked about that you can only delete it. You can't update it. There's no indication that the message was ever created once you save it until you actually look at the broadcast tab, because you're still on the send message. So that can get a little confusing. We already know about the group ID issue. You can set it to automatically delete if you wanted to from the end user's device by an expiration date. And if the broadcast is created in Remedy ITSM, all company end users can see the broadcast in their news feed section of DWP. So they also can get the bell and the push notification if they go in and modify their preference setting. I'm not going to spend too much on SmartID because you can actually go in and create the ticket again through SmartID by doing the create broadcast message, but it does have its limitations. You have 255 characters instead of 1,000. You can include an attachment. You can send it to a company or to a location. It has that capability that you didn't get in the DWP side, but it does not appear until the date that you put in there as to when the broadcast is going to take place. So this shows you that broadcast message designator. It'll tell you what's required. It'll flag anything that you need to populate and so forth in that capacity. So in this case here, a broadcast message is built to run 10 days from the time it was created. So it's something that I don't want to take place, and it won't, because it's going to occur, as I mentioned, 10 days from now. So at that 10-day point, what's going to happen is the broadcast that's built to run immediately due to an outage will show up now, but it won't show up if it's scheduled in 10 days. So the message 10 days out does not appear in the dashboard of the left-hand side of SmartID, but the one that immediately triggered will show up in that capacity. You can do a change of the 3-dot search to show me all the broadcasts. And again, you're only going to see the ones that are actually active. So it doesn't help you to plan in that capacity. There's no planning in SmartID for any broadcast messages for potential issues or outages. In DWP, the viewing of the broadcast, when I basically said that it doesn't show up and so forth, from the chart, it does show up in DWP if you did create it in SmartID. As you can see here, it's displayed up on the DWP side. So that chart basically that's on the documentation is not 100% accurate. If you do it in ITSM, you have more control and you have more sending out to whoever you wanted to do it. But again, you still need that broadcast submitter permission. So if I click on the create option, I can attach this broadcast to an incident. I cannot do that in SmartID or DWP. I can identify who can see this by the location and so forth. I can even modify the message if I need to modify it directly coming into here. I cannot modify it in SmartID and I cannot modify it in DWP in that capacity. I can even give it to a select number of groups to modify the broadcast. By default, it's my default group that's associated to it. But I can add another group if I wanted to manage it in my absence. And if I wanted to notify somebody, I have this notify option that allows me to send it out to an email to a group of who I want to send out as a notification email. So viewing the broadcast message in BMC ITSM, you can see this functionality that's available on any bell functionality that's on the console. You can click on it. It shows you all of the broadcast messages. Then you can double click on it to view it. And then from this case, you can actually configure that broadcast message. And here's where you can see it as well to view it and make modifications. Does it show up in DWP? Yes. If you make a change in ITSM, it does not change it in DWP. So they still get to see the old data. Okay. Same thing in SmartID. So one of the things I came up with for my customers, maybe to consider a different avenue to share it across the board. And then the other thing is if I broadcast something to let them know, maybe they have an issue with that. So then they can relate an incident to that issue or to that broadcast. So what I did was, in this case here, I created a service request definition in SRM. I'm pretty sure you could do it in DWP, and the user can see it on their DWP catalog. SmartID can see it through the Smart Recorder, and they can see what broadcast messages are there. The broadcast message is not going to get removed until the time is expired. Can I modify it? Sure, I can modify it. I can go in and make the change, save it, and now it's back up on the screen. But it's there. It allows them to look at it. It allows them to click on it, and then if they click on it, they can actually say something. So how did I set this up? Well, first of all, with this being SRM, I created the little icon with the announcement. So I had to add my image. Then I had to add the category to attach it to it, which is broadcast message. Then I go in, and you can see all the steps. I'm not going to read the steps, this one. Then in the configuration setting, I had to define the template that I wanted to go. Well, my customer already has a default template that I can use. So I can use that functionality because it's there, but I could create my own if I wanted to. I go to the AOT. Well, since I already picked one that was already there, I didn't have to do anything. So I took their default. I didn't have to do their PDT either or build one because I took their default. Everything is there from my customer to build this broadcast except for the SRD. And in the SRD, this is what I'm giving them in the instructions. This is the instructions that they see in the front of what this broadcast is all about. So now they can see it. Now, if you look at the end date, that's when the broadcast ends. So it'll go away from their display. Now, when I do this article that shows up in here, I will have to go in, I fill it out. And what can happen is when they create the broadcast message, I set up my service request. It's saying, I'm doing the work, disable the survey, don't need it. Approval type is none. I go in and turn off these extra fields that they don't need to see, add the image. I add my questions. So if they have an issue, they can add the questions. And these are the same questions my customer uses in a standard issue. So if they have an issue with the broadcast, they can record it. And now I know what the ticket is coming from because it's coming from the broadcast. So this template GUID is basically just pulling up whatever the default one is. I didn't have to do an action because I know an action doesn't work in SmartID. So I hard-coded the template to make it work. And then I do my mapping, set it up. And the only drawback with this, I mean, once you set it up, you can always do a mirror of everything. It's not that difficult to do. But then you have to go into DWP admin. You have to go to the service request. I created my little catalog section of broadcast alert messages. And I added my SRD to it so they can start seeing it. And it shows up. So it's a few more steps. But in reality, they get to see it. They can start using it. And so now they have it. They click on it. They see it in big, bold red. They can answer the ticket questions. They can submit it. And when it comes in as a submission, it now can be acknowledged to whoever the template's going to get it. And now I can see the payroll outage, and there's a reference that somebody had an issue with. So that's where you can keep a track of a broadcast message still available to both SmartID as well as to DWP users. And then you could also look to see if there were any issues tied to that type of broadcast message. So in conclusion, you still have the out-of-the-box capabilities, but the limitations, and you have the capability of an SRD to display it if you're using SRM. Again, you could do it possibly as DWP. I have not built it that way, but it is a possibility to display. Okay, any questions? Well, thanks for joining, Chris. Did you have any questions at all on using this functionality?
Oh, I'm good, Lenny.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it. I mean, it's really just to give you a heads up on the concerns about broadcast and things like that. Another option that I gave a customer was to put it as an outage ticket, but that only helps the support people. Okay, it doesn't help the DWP people. So generally, it's just something that you got to make aware of or be aware of on these things.
Yeah, that's pretty darn clever.
Yeah, I try to get people at Depot to use the broadcast, but they don't use it. They'd rather broadcast messages through SharePoint.
They broadcast the what?
Banners or messages and everything through. They very SharePoint heavy.
Oh yeah,
Instead of using Remedy.
SharePoint heavy. Yeah, I heard about that. So, but again, I mean, I like this functionality because it keeps track of how many tickets were there for that broadcast, and you never lose that data. And if you wanted to re-enable it for the most part, I mean, yeah, it expired, but you could change the date and reactivate it if you wanted to, or change that because it's always going to be there.
Yeah. Do you see a use of reusing the same broadcast over, just changing it for context, or would you create a new SRD?
If you reuse it over and over and over again, your incident tickets would be related to the same SRD.
True.
But again, you could always look at the text because I actually passed the text to the notes. So that would tell me the difference of the time period. So if I was going to reuse it, I would make sure somewhere along the line that the date of the range of it is added somewhere.
Yeah, maybe even update the template, maybe categorization.
Right.
Okay.
So that's what you got to look at into doing that. So this, I mean, it's just another avenue. Did my customer go with it? Not yet. I mean, it's there, but they don't use broadcast. They don't broadcast anymore. Yeah. They spam or they put their emails in spam a lot is what they do. So, all right. Well, that's it, Chris. We're done for the conference, done for this session. So if you don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and stop the recording. And we will talk to you later.